views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Hello? Hello? My voice must be losing it because you didn't hear me. Good morning. Okay. Pursuant to Chapter 4, Section 85, and Chapter 69, Section 2706 of the New York City Charter, a joint meeting of the Bronx Borough Service Cabinet and the Bronx Borough Board will take place on Wednesday, August 23rd, 2017 at 9:15 a.m. at 198 East 161st Street, 10th floor conference room. We have 3 items on the agenda today. And I will announce them as we go along because we're changing the order. But at this point in time, I'd like to just pause a moment in recognition and in honor of our former district manager, Andrew Sandler, who we lost over this summer. So if we can just take a moment of silence in respect to him. Thank you. The first item on our agenda today will be the neighborhood rat reduction plan, which we're all interested in hearing about. We have a presentation by Caroline Bragdon, the Director of Neighborhood Interventions for the Department of Health and Mental Health.
I'm the Director of Neighborhood Interventions for Pest Control Services at the Health Department. I have been here over the years to share the different initiatives that we've launched around neighborhood rat reduction. Some of you may recall the Bronx Rat Indexing Initiative that we launched back in 2009, where we started inspecting every single tax lot in a select group of community districts. We moved on to the Attacking Rat Reservoir program, where we used the indexing data. Oh, the whole thing just went out. Hopefully it'll come back.
Everyone has copies,
Okay, so it's okay. Where we use the indexing data to identify the neighborhoods that have the highest burden of infestation, to really target our resources to those neighborhoods. And now we have the Mayor's Neighborhood Rat Reduction Plan launched in this fiscal year to basically bring together a variety of agencies to now engage in a multi-agency effort to reduce rat activity in the most infested neighborhoods. So what I'm hoping to be able to do is show you the neighborhoods that we're going to be working in, and as well as, we all know your code now. There. Good. Now you guys can all respond to my emails about rat infestation. Okay, so let me first just talk about what the broad aim is. The Neighborhood Rat Reduction Plan aims to reduce rats in the neighborhoods that have the highest level of infestation. The reason we have rats in New York City is because of the large amounts of garbage that attract rats. Rats need garbage to feed on. Rats only need an ounce of food a day to survive and to flourish. In areas where there's a lot of uncontained, uncontrolled garbage, you tend to have rats. Rats also follow densely populated neighborhoods. The more humans, the more trash, the more rats. So in recognition of that, the mayor is basically retargeting $32 million to 3 broad areas that have the highest burden of rat activity. So, this computer does not seem to like me.
When your phone locks, it
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening, so I'll keep my hand. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see the map. You all have the map on the slide. So what we're looking at here is a map that shows what we're calling the rat mitigation zone for the Bronx. There are 3 rat mitigation zones. One is in the Bronx, one is in Brooklyn, and one is in Manhattan. The rat mitigation zones broadly encompass areas that we were targeting as rat reservoirs in the last fiscal year. So we had launched the Attacking Rat Reservoir program, and what you see in blue on this map are areas that we had declared rat reservoirs back in 2015. Okay, and these were the areas that had the highest burden of infestation, which means to us the highest count of properties that had rat activity and the highest count of properties that had 311 complaints and the highest count of properties that needed some kind of remediation effort from the health department. Okay, so those are those areas in blue. These are we're calling this the Grand Concourse rat mitigation zone because we're roughly following the Grand Concourse all the way up, but it also includes community districts 4, 5, 6, and 7, and the neighborhoods of Grand Concourse, Concourse Village, Belmont, Highbridge, Mount Hope, and Fordham. Okay, so what is the health department doing as part of this plan? The first and foremost is we're continuing to inspect every single tax lot, whether it's public or private, in each rat mitigation zone, and in fact in each of these 4 community districts, in 4, 5, 6, and 7. However, we are now moving from 1 round of indexing per year to 1 round of indexing every 6 months. So that means every 6 months, inspectors will be crossing throughout all these neighborhoods looking for signs of rat activity. When we find signs of rat activity, we send an order to abate to the property owner, whether that property owner is a city agency or a private entity. In addition to that, we will be using inspection data to identify buildings that have the highest number of violations and then leading multi-agency inspections. Okay, so we are trying, this effort seeks to avoid the next cluster of leptospirosis, right? So if you all recall, that cluster that happened in January happened in a multifamily building that was already on our radar because it had a large number of violations. However, we needed HPD and DOB alongside the health department in that building to really respond to the violations they were having. This multi-agency inspectional effort seeks to avoid the next problem by getting us out there to do the inspections together prior to the next disaster. Does that make, hopefully that makes sense. I would be happy to take referrals for those buildings. If you have questions about buildings that you're getting complaints about that's on your radar as being problematic, we will be continuously compiling lists of buildings that need that multi-agency inspection effort. And the multi-agencies are health, DOB, HPD, sanitation. Okay, and that will really help us find these interior problems. In addition, we'll be coordinating multi-agency follow-up when it's needed. So when we find problems, we'll be, farming out the follow-up to the agencies that need to respond. Okay, whether those problems are outside or inside. Okay, hopefully you all have seen the slide enough so that if it goes out again, I'll keep my finger on the screen. I have case managers that are assigned to each area. The case managers will be available to private owners and public, city-owned properties that want to do walkthroughs of the neighborhoods or of individual properties to really look at what the problems are and think about how to come up with solutions. So for example, in this area, We did walkthroughs with DCAS managers to really look at what some of the issues were and why there were rats in this neighborhood, and to come up with creative solutions. What can we do to reduce rat activity? How can we respond? I have 3 excellent case managers assigned. They work out of our Bronx office. They are available to help, to lead walkthroughs. If you want to schedule a walkthrough, all you have to do is send me an email and I will refer you to that local case manager. We also offer the Rat Academy and other educational workshops. So if an office wants to sponsor a Rat Academy, we can come in, we bring our residential trash cans, we can come in, we can teach a workshop. We like to have a local community host. We can tailor that workshop to meet the needs of the audience. So if it's building managers, if it's residents, if it's community gardeners, if it's businesses, we can tailor it. The other work that we're doing is we are launching an effort with the Fordham Road bid to install 32 solar compacting, high-end, rat-resistant litter baskets. That effort is underway. It's going to be happening this fall. Those big belly solar compacting cans will be branded with neighborhood cleanliness and rat prevention messages as part of this overall mayoral rat reduction program. What have I stopped? We have a new stoppage program, primarily targeted towards parks and other kinds of public areas where when we find rat burrows, the nests where rats live, I now will have 2 additional staff in the Bronx that I can deploy to, when possible, seal up those holes. Okay, so an example of that is we've been getting a lot of complaints about rat activity in the DOT street steps. So I can, now while we still will rely on DOT or sanitation to clean them, if they have structural holes that are allowing rats to harbor, I can now send my 2-person crew to seal those steps, when safe, when possible. If there's major structural damage, we have to refer back to DOT. We also have exterminators who will be treating parks. We've already been treating a large number of parks in the Bronx. We will continue to do that. Once we get the dry ice approved, if you've heard of the dry ice methodology, we'll be using that in the Bronx. If you haven't heard of it, I can talk through it a little bit. And then finally, my research scientist crowd will be doing a high-level evaluation of this effort. We are seeking to reduce rats in neighborhoods. The question is, will all these activities actually finally lead to a reduction in rats? That's the goal. We want to achieve that goal. An evaluation will help us do it. Okay, so I talked through a lot of things. Does anyone have questions?
Okay. Yes, I have a question. Is it possible that you can do public service announcements, letting people know that they should not be cooking on the streets? Because they leave litter.
Yes.
And the rats come right behind them.
So the answer is yes. So we have some funding to do a media campaign. And the media campaign is going to be targeted towards some key audiences. And so some of those key audiences are businesses, but another key audience is our NYCHA and NYCHA residents and staff. We will be looking for other areas. One of the things we've been thinking about is parks patrons. So to the extent that the cooking, barbecuing is happening either in parks or in front of parks, we've been trying to think creatively about how we can get people to understand that buffets of food for humans, when left behind, become buffets of food for rats. And really, the Parks Department is struggling to stay on top of that. I mean, all weekend long, people are cooking and serving food in parks, and then we turn around and complain immediately that rats are in parks, but it's really that behavior that's leading to the rat activity. So to the extent that we can, we're going to be trying to get that message out. We've been thinking about using the big bellies to put out the public service messages, but also bus shelters, and then also maybe doing some social media. But I welcome other suggestions, and I will take that one back to the group.
The other suggestion I have, where we have a lot of, I'll call it construction.
Yeah.
Of our city streets.
Yes.
And our city steps
Yes.
throughout the borough.
Yes.
And you need to take a second look at those areas, because where that is happening, we see an increase in rat.
Yes. Point well made. DDC, if it is DDC, sometimes it's Con Ed.
Yeah.
Within the context of the district service cabinet meeting, it can be useful for us when a community board becomes aware of new construction happening in your district. Sometimes asking for that walkthrough with one of our case managers can help. So if the case manager says, oh, the street you're about to rip up, we know this is already a rat hotspot. What can the construction manager do to get out in front of the problem? That's exactly the kind of thing a case manager could do.
Okay. Okay, good. Tracy?
Hi, thank you. How are you coordinating with MTA and the subways, and also with Metro North and Amtrak about the railroad tracks?
Okay.
A lot of garbage is dumping,
Yeah,
you know.
a lot of garbage dumping on the tracks. So yes, ongoing issue in all the boroughs with exposed tracks. You know, they're dumping on the tracks, attracting rats, and then rats burrowing in the embankments is a problem. It's also a problem for MTA and Metro North to shut down the tracks in order to clean them, right? So what we know is that if they need to clean, they need to shut down the tracks. That makes people unhappy, right? They have to suspend service. It's a safety issue. So I think the real response from us has to be, let's get people to stop dumping.
Right.
Either whether it's illegal dumping or just people littering. One of the things that we've talked about with Department of Sanitation is in areas where there's a lot of illegal dumping to do some extra enforcement. And so one thing that we could do is talk more about where is the illegal dumping occurring and how do we catch those people so that they stop. Because it truly is I've been doing this for so many years, and we keep going back to MTA and Metro North asking for cleaning the tracks, and they keep explaining to us they need to keep those tracks running. And shutting them down to clean as regularly as we would need to keep food away from rats is operationally very hard for them. So we got to get people to stop dumping.
Right. George?
Thank you. Morning.
Hi.
So I'm just curious, working with public entities is one thing. I'm just curious this multi-agency response on private property owners, because as you are aware, I've gone out on walking tours with you many
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah.
So, and I used to work in the buildings department,
Yep.
and I know that, you know, there's certain attitudes that agencies take with regards to there's oh so much we can do. We
Yeah.
issued the fine,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yep.
What, for example, the mayor instituted this program in response to what happened on the Grand Concourse.
Yeah.
What has been the response from that landlord in
Yeah.
regards to his property?
Okay, so that cluster that we had on the Grand Concourse led to intensive case management of the two properties that had the cases. Luckily, in both cases, the building owner and manager was highly compliant with our orders. So what we gave them were extremely detailed work plans and orders. I also had the case manager on site on a weekly basis, coaching the manager to make sure they stayed on track. Now, that effort took months of, weekly involvement. But HPD was doing the same with them. And, I'm happy to say that both buildings are on the right track in overall, in making sure they maintain a rodent-free building. To the extent that, I'm not sure if I could promise that I would have a staff person on site on a weekly basis in every rat-active building in the Bronx, but when we find the really bad ones, yes, we can. I mean, that's why we hired up for this program, so that I can, when we find that next building, we can have someone on site to coach. Now, let's say we have an owner who lives in Florida and completely ignores us. What you said is going to apply. I mean, all of the agencies are issuing violations. If that owner chooses to stay absent, it does create problems for us. I have to say, though, when they see the violations start to pile up, it's not just health. When they get the DOB, HPD, sanitation, they may start to pay attention. That was the idea of those original walkthroughs, and we're going to keep pushing on it. See what happens.
Mr. Hall? Huh?
Hi, Bill Hall, Community Board 12. You mentioned that you issue an order of abatement. I just wanted to know exactly what that process was, what
Sure.
types of poisons you put down, and also the dry ice process, which
Sure.
I really don't understand.
Sure. Okay. So our typical workflow, and again, in the rat mitigation zones and in the rat reservoirs, we do this intensively, but we also do this throughout the Bronx. So every community district, has inspectors working on a daily basis. When we find signs of rat activity on a property, that information, that inspection report goes into our system, and we use Department of Finance records to identify the property owner and then send them a commissioner's order to abate. What the order says is health code, outlines that property owners are responsible for maintaining a pest-free environment for their neighbors and residents, and that property owner is ordered to clean and to hire a pest control firm to treat the property. So they need to clean up, fix any structural problems allowing rats to harbor, and hire a pest control firm. We want them to do their own work. We send an inspector back to do a compliance inspection. If we continue to find rat activity, we will issue a violation to the property owner. It's actually a summons. They have the opportunity to go back to the Environmental Control Board, have their case heard. What we also do at that point, though, is we send an exterminator to treat the property. Our exterminators on private properties are using an anticoagulant bait. It's a rodenticide. They're highly effective when used properly. The thing is rats have to consume it for it to be effective. And if there's a lot of garbage around, it's hard for us to get rats to eat our bait.
Quick question. Are they,
Yeah.
is that dangerous to the general public or kids that are playing in the area, that whatever chemical you're using?
We use rodenticides according to, so first of all of our exterminators are certified by the New York State DEC. It's extensive training. They are trained in following labeled directions that are, again, approved by the EPA and the state DEC. Basically, rodenticides are either put in a container bait station. You'll see those black boxes. Those are tamper-resistant boxes that have bait inside so that rats can go in and feed on the bait, but non-targets, humans, dogs, other pets, can't. Right? We also do burrow baiting, where we insert the bait deep down inside the rat's nest. Again, only a rat will get access to that bait. So it's not no risk of secondary poisoning. We do see private exterminator companies not following label directions, and sometimes we do see exposed bait. In that case, we usually ask that someone clean it up, because you don't want to see exposed bait. That's not legal, but that's the state DEC who regulates that.
And the dry ice process?
Dry ice is basically, anyone can buy dry ice, right? But and the health department had been using dry ice, along with, there were other cities that were trying this as a method for killing rats. And basically, what we were doing was we were buying pelletized dry ice and we were inserting it into rats' nests in parks only. And the reason being is we needed to know where the entrance and the exit of the rat's nest was. What we were doing is putting dry ice in and then sealing the two sides of the nest. And the fumes from the carbon dioxide would basically asphyxiate the rats in their nest, and they would die, and then we would go in and seal the nest so that they would basically be just buried. The thing about the dry ice method is that it was a great method because, one, the rats didn't have to consume it, and two, there was really no risk of a secondary poisoning or a non-target being exposed to the baits. But what happened is EPA and DEC kind of found out that different entities, it wasn't just us, were using dry ice and said, if you're using a substance to kill a pest, you have to have it labeled as a pesticide. That's the law. So we stopped that work. We went to DEC. We got a company to sponsor the registration of the product as a pesticide. It's now marketed as a pesticide called rat ice, sorry. And you can, and starting this fall, you'll be able to buy rat ice and use it. And we'll be using it in parks. The thing is rat ice, dry ice, really is only useful in areas where you know where your entrance and your exit is of your borough. And that's really just certain kinds of situations in parks. So we will continue to use it in parks, but we'll also be using all the other methods in areas where, you know, there's structural problems. For example, if you have a rat hole that's initiating in the sidewalk but maybe going into someone's cellar, you don't want to put pelletized dry ice down in there. You don't know where that carbon dioxide is letting out. So, and we hope that once it's registered, the label will be really clear about where you can use it and where you can't, and we want everyone who starts to use it safely. We'll be offering a lot of training on how to use it safely.
Okay. Marisol?
Good morning. I just wanted two questions. One is, how are you coordinating with NYCHA?
Yeah.
Because they have a lot of park space, for the lack of a better
Okay.
word, and open space, and we get a lot of complaints from their properties.
Yes.
And I know sanitation is here, so I know there's a lot of coordination that has to happen
Yes.
with the collections and how they're storing the garbage and the whole stuff. So I just wanted to know how you're coordinating
Yeah.
with NYCHA. And the other part of that question is, when are you moving to the other community boards?
Okay, so
If it
thank you
hasn't
for
been
the
done
question
already.
because you're making me realize that I didn't really clearly say in the beginning who the core partner agencies are. NYCHA, Health, Parks, and Sanitation. Those are the 4 agencies that are receiving funding from the mayor. In the press release, you may have seen that's $32 million. The 4 agencies are each getting a piece of that pie. Health Department's only getting less than $2 million, right, of the 32. NYCHA's getting the bulk of the money, and it's going towards structural repairs for NYCHA, and it's also going towards new compactors for NYCHA. So many NYCHA buildings are structurally old, and rats take advantage of the older structures by harboring within them. So again, if you've seen the press release, there's a mention of dirt floors in many NYCHA buildings. These buildings are so old, they literally have dirt floors still. And this is one of the things, I don't know if you remember this, George, from the original walkthroughs, we would find the dirt floors in some of these buildings littered with rat holes. So sealing those up with concrete pads will go a long way towards eliminating rats on the interior of some of the NYCHA buildings. On the exterior, replacing elderly compactors with new compactors that are rat resistant, and keeping those compactors clean and in operation will also go a long way towards eliminating the food source for rats. You know, if you do a walkthrough at night, you can see the rats just going in and out of these compactors, having a feast. eliminating the feast is the key.
The other part to that is the parkland that you have there, because when you talked about the stoppage crews that you have.
Yes, yes.
I'm wondering how much of an effort is
Yes.
being made to get
Yeah.
to those boroughs. I don't want to call out a particular development, but
Yes.
it's not in 4, 5, 6, or 7.
Yes.
So when you say you're concentrating your efforts in those boards, while they have a lot of the
Yeah.
NYCHA developments, there are a lot of other boards that have more of those
Yes.
issues as we see it.
So first of all, Health and NYCHA work together all the time on all different kinds of developments all over the city. So I'm always happy to take your referrals, and we can send staff to do a walkthrough with NYCHA. But NYCHA is a property owner just like any other property owner. So what we do is we refer problems back to them with plans on what they should do to remediate. So we'll do the inspection, we'll do the walkthrough, and then we let them know. So if you're talking about Monterey houses, or that's been coming to us a lot.
No, I mean, I don't want to call them out, but I'm going to
Okay.
have to. It's actually Patterson houses, so
Okay.
we get that all the time.
At the end of the meeting, I'll make sure I take whatever referrals I can, and we can send staff out. There are a number of developments that we may already be working on, referring. In the rat mitigation zones, I've sent staff to go out, and they've actually already counted every single rat burrow on these developments, so that we can track the burrow counts as NYCHA starts to take steps to, reduce the infestation and make sure we're going in the right direction.
So, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to
Yeah.
monopolize, but when you go back to the compactors, the storage of those compactors has always been an issue for
Yes.
NYCHA. So have you guys come up with a plan on how to address that?
So I mean, replacing old compactors that are basically open buffets is really the first step. So the other day I had the opportunity to go to Fulton Houses in Chelsea. They had a brand new compactor. It was completely sealed. That rats could not get into that thing. And the other benefit of having it was like odor voiding. So it actually, it made the whole area more pleasant. The challenge for NYCHA and the staff of NYCHA is that the garbage has got to go in the compactor. If the garbage goes out the window or out the door and it's leaning up against the fence, or people are littering, then it's not in this brand new, tens of thousands of dollar compactor. So what we are doing is, part of the media campaign is going to be directed specifically to NYCHA residents, saying over and over again, the role of the resident is to follow garbage guidelines, and the garbage guidelines within NYCHA is get your garbage down the chute. It's got to go in the chute, so it goes in the compactor. If it's in the chute, down the compactor, it goes in the brand new, the compactor, and then sanitation can pick it up from the compactor. If it doesn't go down the chute, if it goes out the window, if it goes out front door, the residents are creating their own rat problems. And we will be doing tenant meetings, we'll be doing posters, we'll be doing workshops to try to get everyone on board with that concept. And if it's not happening, then we're going to go back to NYCHA and suggest they do some enforcement around it. Actually sending tenants letters, actually monitoring with cameras who's throwing garbage out their window, going back to them, and letting them know that's not acceptable. It's creating a quality of life problem for the other residents.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments?
Yes, Kathleen?
Thank you. Just a question for the light please, on the big bellies.
Yes. Okay, so now I really wish I'd brought a picture of a big belly. So a big belly is a solar compacting a can where basically they're advertised as holding up to 3 times more garbage than a typical litter basket. So the goal of using a big belly is that, first of all, rats can't get in these cans. So it's totally rat proof. So they can't get in to feed. But 2, it should solve some of the problems we have around overflowing litter baskets. Okay, so if you walk down the street, you see mesh baskets that sometimes overflow, especially on weekends, in the evenings. By having the high-end compacting litter basket, you should eliminate that problem. Now, the reason we're putting it into a bid area is because we'll be working with the bid service staff, the Fordham Road bid, to make sure that these cans are being serviced and cared for properly, because they do require some labor for service and maintaining. But what the goal is, and what we'll be monitoring, is to eliminate street, litter or litter baskets that are providing access to food for rats. They will also, have this public service messaging on the sides. They look like big gray boxes. Actually, you can see them because we already bought them for some of the parks. Parks Department will also be removing all of their mesh litter baskets and replacing them with either Big Bellies or the high-end steel cans. So again, it's eliminating the food source for rats.
And just one other question, in the parks where you are doing your rat ice and
Yes.
will you have signs posted in any way that this area has been evaluated and anything that's installed there?
Yeah, so that's a really good idea. Right now, if Health or Parks Department is treating an area with rodenticide, you may see a sign up, right? And it'll on the sign it will say what was used. You should see those signs. Hopefully everyone sees those signs. It says, that rodenticide has been applied, the date of application. And the reason for that is we want people to know that rodenticide is in the area. Even though we're using safe methods for treatment, it's extra precaution. With dry ice, there's really no risk of secondary poisoning, so there would be no requirement by law to put a sign up, but we could certainly have signs up so that people know that steps are being taken to respond to a rat infestation. So we can, once we launch that program probably won't be launched until late October. We're still working out some issues with distribution of the product. Dry ice evaporates very quickly, so it's actually, the methods of using it are kind of complicated because you have to buy it and use it immediately. You can't store it anywhere.
Adeline?
Hi, I'm Adeline I'm the chair of Committee Board 7. I have two different questions. You talked about NYCHA and this getting the biggest funding and these different agencies. My concern is also, in my area, I have a lot of old buildings from the 1940s, maybe before. And when you were talking about the compactors, they have the old compactors, they have the cans outside overflowing. I tend to think they probably have the dirt foundation. What funding is given to handle those buildings, because we have a lot of them, and then we have a lot of new developments going up even across the street from them. So and you see those little black boxes in front of these apartment buildings. What money is given to help those buildings?
You mean the private properties?
These are private properties built in the 1940s or before, and they have these problems constantly because I know we get calls that sometimes when they do get somebody to finally hear their complaints, they're even eating through their floors. So, I mean, what's going to be done about that? Where's the money for helping them to get the compactors? Because NYCHA is a different
private properties, the owner is responsible for maintaining their own building. And I know it's really hard because some owners may be struggling. I can bring that question back to the task force to say, has anyone thought about offering grants or anything to help struggling private property owners? I think the feeling is some of these property owners, may actually be kind of slumlords, and that they should fix their problems. I mean, that was certainly the case of the buildings that we were dealing with on the Grand Concourse. To the extent that some of these owners may be struggling financially, what we encourage is that those owners reach out to us immediately. If they get an order, they should call us before we go for the compliance inspection and say they, need assistance, so that we don't think that they're non-compliant. We need to know from owners when they intend to do the right thing but can't because of money problems. Too often, owners don't call us, and then the violations are issued, and then much later, years later, they complain that they can't afford the violation amounts. But if they never reach out to us, we don't know they want to fix the problem.
Well, the part I'm really concerned about, do you have a case managers that can go to a private building and inspect, is the floor made of dirt, is the compactors right, is the garbage being eliminated? Do they actually go to these private buildings if we're getting complaints?
Yes.
Do you go there and do you make a report that we get to see what the results are, and we
Yes.
can help follow up? Because this
Yeah.
is important, because I think you're doing a campaign for NYCHA and all this, but we need a campaign for the general public
Yes.
who does live in the older buildings
Yes.
and who maybe, we have a lot of developments going on.
Yeah. In fact, if you want to assemble, if you are in touch with owners or managers, if you want to assemble them and host
Sure.
a meeting, we could come and talk to them directly. They could meet their case manager, and they could proactively schedule walkthroughs
Perfect.
to specifically avoid this issue.
What's your contact information? Please let us know.
I will give you my card, and anyone else who wants it before we leave. Also, we can email it.
My last question is, you putting the big bellies in the parks, and I have a great amount of parks. How many are going in each park? Is there an amount that's
So 58 big bellies were already deployed by the health department last fiscal year in parks in the Bronx. I have to get you the number from the Parks Department. So what happened is health department bought the first batch. The Parks Department is actually getting their own money from the mayor's office to buy the second batch.
Okay.
There's a total of 157 cans that Parks is getting money for, but it's spread out between the 3 boroughs. So I'll get back to you with the total number of big bellies. But I do know that all the mesh cans will be replaced with either a high-end steel can or a big belly in every park.
That's good news. The last thing I just wanted to ask was about the raccoons.
Oh, yeah.
I don't hear, if you have anything to say about raccoons. We have a big issue with raccoons.
Yes.
That comes up a lot.
Health Department doesn't actually have any jurisdiction over raccoons, but there's a couple of things that I can tell you. Raccoons are attracted to the exact same conditions that rats are. Uncontained garbage and clutter and, any property in disarray. So frequently when we get complaints about raccoons, what we're finding is they're nesting in, massive piles of clutter. For example, there was a parking lot down the street from here between the 2 buildings that had cases of leptospirosis that we picked up. There was a big mound of construction debris, and there were raccoons' nests in that debris. So we go back again to the responsibility of the property owner to, maintain a clean environment. If you have a vacant lot, an abandoned building that has piles of brush, piles of construction clutter, if you have a vacant lot that's overrun with weeds, a tree fallen down, raccoons will take advantage and build their nest, and then nearby, if you have uncontained garbage, they will happily feed. Raccoons are looking for the same thing as rats. The more owners and city agencies can clean up, the fewer raccoons you're going to see. We cannot we can't bait or trap raccoons. That's not what the health department does. If an owner is having a problem with raccoons, they have to go to New York State DEC's website, find a certified wildlife trapper, and pay money to have that animal trapped, removed, and euthanized. It is expensive. It's better to just prevent them.
John? Yeah.
morning, Carolyn. How you
take it out.
feeling?
Hi.
Take it out.
Yeah, let me just take. Good morning, Carolyn.
Hi.
How you doing? Let me just a couple of quick questions. I know you mentioned NYCHA, Department of Health, Mental Hygiene, Department of Sanitation. Was Parks the fourth agency? that
Yes,
we talked
Parks
about?
is the fourth
Okay,
agency,
You
yeah.
said you were getting a little under $2 million as part of
Yes,
this.
yes.
Is that money, whatever that actual dollar amount is that related to staff, pesticide and equipment purchasing that the health department?
Yeah, the 1.9 million that we're getting out of the 32 million allocation is purchasing for me, and this is staff that will be covering all 3 rat mitigation zones. So Bronx, Manhattan, and Brooklyn. I'm getting 8 new staff, 1 high-level like evaluation person, 6 people that will be doing the borough plugging, the stoppage, 2 of whom will be in the Bronx, and then 1 community coordinator who will be working with me to do these workshops, to do the tenant meetings, who will be on the ground. So those are the staff.
Case managers would also be in addition
The
to
case
what you
managers were
talked about.
hired under the Rat Reservoir program, so I already have 3 really good case managers in the Bronx.
Okay, so they're
Yeah.
coming from another budget line.
They're all, yeah.
Well, let me just ask you another quick question for a minute. When we talk, because you talked about NYCHA, right? What do you know how much NYCHA is receiving? And then I'm going to ask you another. No, not offhand. Right?
I can send the budget allocation. It was in the press release.
It
I
was in
can send the
pre-
link
that's
to the
right, don't even
press
worry. We're
release.
not
I
in
can't
good
remember
shape.
off the top
But
of
let
my
me
head.
just ask you, part of that money that NYCHA is receiving is going to
Yes.
go to installation of new compactors at NYCHA developments that don't have existing compactors.
Either that don't have a good compactor or that has a compactor that's so old it's not effective.
Okay, so it would either be replacement of one that's old, antiquated, or the installation of a new. Because Morris Houses is one. But that's one particular development in my district that I would want to advocate for. The money that NYCHA is receiving is only going to be targeted for replacement or installation of new compactor systems at NYCHA developments within these community boards?
Within districts 4, 5, 6, and 7.
7, okay.
For now.
For now.
Now, the purpose of the evaluation is if a year from now we're coming back to the group declaring success, the idea is, and this was another question that I failed to answer earlier, the idea is that once we say this is a successful multi-agency effort, then the effort would be expanded to other community districts.
Okay.
And
Thank
we would, so right now, the 4, 5, 6, 6, and 7, those have been our core high failure rate areas for as long as I've worked with the program, but we recognize that there are other areas that have rat problems, so we will be expanding out with success.
Madam, I would just be interested in the budget breakdown, and just
Yeah.
because it allows me to give some thought to how I might want to make recommendations for
Okay.
capital and expense budget.
Yes.
Thank you. so
Yeah,
much.
and as follow-up, I'd be happy to send them.
Let me just add to his question. But would you consider a development that is outside of one of the target boards
Yeah,
if there is an existing rat problem due to the garbage outside?
yeah, I mean, my answer is not my call. I mean, if I had the
Yeah.
if I had the say-so, I would say, let's do this for all the NYCHA developments.
Yeah.
But I think that comes from advocacy to the mayor's office, that they would like to hear back.
Yes. You're gonna just have to follow up on that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Are there any other questions, comments? Yes. Yes, quick.
In our neighborhood, we're finding a new rat problem around shopping centers. And of course, you take a normal shopping center, you have a food store and probably a pizza stand and a donut
Yes,
and an
yeah,
ice cream.
yeah.
And that's a lot of food waste going
Yes.
out from a small area. My question is, those big bellies that people have been asking about, are they a possible solution for the waste that comes out of a small shopping center? And are they available for the private sector to purchase?
Yeah, so Department of Sanitation has their Adopt-A-Can program. I would defer to my colleagues at Department of Sanitation, but one thing that we've seen happen is if a private entity wants to sponsor or adopt a can, that's a solution. Typically, though, big bellies are sponsored by bids. The business improvement districts in the area, we've seen them used very successfully with the Downtown Alliance, with the Times Square Alliance, and there are another number of other bids who are now using them. So if a bid is interested, you know, sanitation and health have met before with bids to say, you know, what some of the pros and cons are to using the cans.
But are they available in the private market? Can someone go out
Of
and just buy one?
course.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
How much do they cost, do you know?
They cost $2,900.
Couch change, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you,
Yes,
thank you.
yes. I'm sorry, George. Go right ahead.
You spoke earlier in regards to vacant lots, which plenty of us have,
Yeah.
that don't see a lot of activity.
Yeah.
Can you speak to the time frame? Because I've made 311 complaints about vacant lots that
Yeah.
have dirty lots.
Yep.
And no offense to any city agency, there is oh so much that can be done.
Yes, I know.
So what should we expect, or as district managers or chair people or just anybody who's generally interested in vacant lots that consistently pose a problem?
Yeah. So Health Department and Department of Sanitation work jointly together on vacant lots. And the way that we do that is typically both an inspector from health and an inspector from sanitation will be deployed to look. We're looking for signs of rat activity. Department of Sanitation, I don't know if you want to talk more about what your inspectors are picking up, but either way, what happens is we upload those inspections into the systems. When sanitation identifies a vacant lot that they want to clean, we actually pull that data into our system and we print and mail an order to the owner under our, basically under our health code. So the order goes to the property owner. If they don't clean it themselves, which they typically don't, then that gives us the ability to go in and take action. So if it's the health department, then we're issuing a violation, and we can refer it back to sanitation for cleaning. Sanitation, they have to wait until we mail the order, and then there's additional steps, right? You have to post.
So for the sanitation, once the health department goes in, we have to go in and do an assessment and see what type of litter there is. Just because a vacant lot has simple high weeds does not constitute for us to clean it. If the health department suggests that there's a rat infestation and we consider it to be with a litter condition, then we'll go in and clean it and bill the owner. But this is a process of waiting that we have to give them to see if within that period of time they answer and do their own cleanup. Also, for your basket answer, I'll speak to you after the meeting. We can try to get them to sponsor a basket or adopt a basket program, which will be at no cost. The adopt a basket will be at no cost, would just be simply providing liners to the container. All right? Thank you. You're welcome.
I'm sorry, my final point or question for DOH actually, I've been in this game for a long time, so I call your agency directly and I speak to some of the people, and I don't want to name names, but you don't, is some of this money going to actually go to your cleaning crew? Because my understanding of your cleaning crew is that it's
Skeletal,
3 people, it's
Yes.
a skeleton crew.
Yeah.
So are you looking to ramp that up?
There's an allocation of labor too. So we have a very small cleanup crew. Citywide, we typically only clean between 100 and 120 properties a year. That's nothing when you think about Queens and Staten Island, the zombie properties that we have there. We usually do the properties that have a structure. Sanitation typically does the properties without a structure. Sometimes there's some collaboration to handle ones with a structure when we can't do it. That situation is not going to change. The only thing that's changing in terms of the field staff for us is the addition of the stoppage crew. Generally, health department has been trying to get out of the business of cleaning. And that's been true for, as you know, a number of years. So I think that the original cleanup crews were eliminated around the time when we first started working together.
Okay.
Thank you so
Are
much
there
for your
any other
time and
questions?
attention.
Well,
Be
I wanna
happy to.
thank you for coming in, and this has been quite comprehensive. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll stick
And-
around for any questions later.
Okay. Our next item is the steps to enroll in the organics collection. We have a presentation by Debbie Sheintock, Director of Strategic Partnerships and Outreach, and Ty Zekin, Senior Coordinator, Organics Outreach from the Bureau of Recycling and Sustainability from the Department of Sanitation.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for your time today. As you can tell, I'm not Debbie Sheintock. I'm Tal Zaken. I'm the Senior Coordinator of Organics Outreach at the Department of Sanitation.
Use the microphone.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
And I'm Andrew Hoyle, the Senior Manager for Organic Outreach.
And we're here today to present upon the expansion of DSNY's curbside organics collection service throughout the borough of the Bronx. We're going to talk briefly about our curbside rollout program to serve residences in holding 1 to 9 units, residential units. And we'll also talk about our enrollment program serving larger buildings with 10 or more units in them. So just to give you a brief agenda for today's discussion, we're going to give a program overview, so how the service works, what's involved, what you can expect from DSNY bringing that service to your neighborhoods, and then once that service is established, how residents and others participate in the service. And we'll talk about how this affects each individual community board specifically. So very briefly, DSNY's curbside organics collection program, or organics collection service, is a service where we provide collection of organics at the curbside. Just like you would expect of trash or recycling, what we do is we provide every household with a starter kit, so materials and tools to help them separate out their organics at home. And then they're asked on a regular basis to set their organics out in a rodent-resistant, hard-sided brown bin that the Department of Sanitation provides at no cost to these residents, where they're asked to set their organics out in that bin on a regular schedule. And then just like trash or recycling, DSNY in our collection trucks will come and collect the material now separated from trash and recycling. So, this slide didn't load perfectly, but our goal is to answer the question of what are organics. So organics are food waste, food soiled paper, and leaf and yard waste, or any plant matter that you might have. So very briefly, all of that material could go into our brown bin, which again, to dovetail on Caroline's presentation, very much our goal is to keep this material separate from trash where it would be available for access by rodents or others, and to keep it better contained inside of our brown bins. Some of the benefits of this program, besides, of course, better containing this material and reducing its availability to rodents, is actually the production of beneficial materials. So we can take these organic materials, this organic matter, and instead of treating it like a problem, instead of treating it like a hazard, if we manage it appropriately, we can actually turn it into a resource and a benefit for New Yorkers. And so that is our goal through this program. Mostly what we're doing, the most common beneficial reuse that we're involved with through this program is the production of compost. So actually breaking down this organic material into a useful product that we can use throughout the city in parks, in gardens, to care for our street trees, and to provide a little bit more resiliency for New York City. So the application of this kind of material is good in many ways. in one regard, it helps us care for our city plant life, so our shade canopy and our street trees and other trees. It helps us maintain the resiliency of community gardens as well, which we know are resources to communities for the production of fresh food, as well as community, just acting as a community space. Furthermore, we actually recently this year brought back the Department of Sanitation's Compost Give Back program, where we're making the material available to residents for use at home. So you can use this material in your own garden to grow healthier, more resilient plants as well. Furthermore, beyond composting, we're also, a small amount of the material that we're collecting right now is being processed through a partnership with DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, in a clean energy production program. This will either be electricity or gas generation for the provision of energy to New Yorkers' homes. Of course, furthermore, collecting this material separately of trash brings us as an agency and as a city one step closer to reaching our goal of sending zero waste to landfills by the end of 2030. So this program is expanding throughout the city. Our slides are doing something a little funny here.
To note the handout that you're given.
Yes, please. Yeah, the full slides are pictured on the handouts that were provided. But we are expanding the service throughout New York City. Our goal, and we're on track to meet that goal, is to have this service be available and accessible to New Yorkers in all areas of the city by the end of 2018. And we're doing this through a variety of methods, which we'll tell you about, affecting residents in various building types in differing but very similar ways. First and foremost, as I mentioned before, what we're doing in most areas of the city to provide the service to residents in buildings that hold 1 to 9 residential units, so smaller residential buildings, is what's known as a curbside rollout. Through this program, we're going to deliver brown organics bins, and I brought a sample here with me. Looks like this, to each household. So you can see this bin is going to be a little bit better at, or significantly better at, containing any organic waste, mostly food waste, produced by these households, and keeping it contained in between collections and during collection. To bring this program to New Yorkers, we have a wide-reaching outreach strategy that relies on both direct mailing outreach as well as on-the-ground community outreach and development. So it starts with an official notice that will arrive in the mailbox of every resident in a 1 to 9 unit building with 1 to 9 households. That official notice will let these residents know that their bin is going to be delivered during its delivery month. The whole district will receive bins during a 1 month period. And then at the end of that 1 month period, there will be a second official notice notifying New Yorkers that the service is going to start. And that service will start at the first collection day of the following month, according to Department of Sanitation schedules. We'll make sure that everybody receives a mailer that has that date listed, and it'll be published on our website as well. Beyond just mailers, we also do maintain a presence in the community throughout and beyond the curbside rollout. So this will include outreach representatives who will staff informational tables in highly trafficked public areas in the district, as well as follow the delivery trucks around as they're delivering bins, answering questions that any residents might have for us about the program, about how it works, or any other issue related to organics collection. And of course, we develop community contacts throughout this process so that we can maintain that connection to answer any questions that might arise following the curbside rollout. And just to give you a little bit of a sense of the schedule, I'm glad this one worked. So in July, we delivered bins to Bronx 10 and 11. with their service starting at the beginning of August. And this month, we're delivering bins in Bronx 8 and 12, and their service will start at the beginning of September. Service will be once a week on recycling days, so it's going to be the exact same collection schedule for anybody who is concerned about having to bring out an additional bin. You know now that it's not going to be really much additional labor. You're bringing it out on the same schedule, and so there's not really much of a disruption for how to participate in DSNY's curbside programs. Now, if you're in a building that has more than 9 units, 10 or more units in it, we also want you to participate in this program. However, we don't automatically deliver these bins to buildings with 10 or more units in them. There are a lot of good reasons for this. Most specifically, it's that we want to better coordinate with the building staff at each of these buildings to help them understand the best practices for managing a program like this. So we want to work with each building to set up building-specific plans for how this service could most efficiently, most effectively, and most cleanly work inside of those buildings. The process to do this I'll tell you about in a little bit, but it's very simple. You can visit us online and submit an inquiry. Anybody can submit an inquiry. And it essentially lets us know that there is interest in the area. And then we will conduct some follow-up to engage with the building around that. I'll tell you a little bit more about that shortly. Just to give you a sense about how this affects the Bronx, this affects all buildings in all districts of the Bronx with 10 or more units. They are all eligible and invited and encouraged to please submit a request for this kind of service, and we would be happy to follow up and work with you to establish it. So I'll give you a little bit more detail about that. So there are sort of 5 steps to receiving service if you're in a larger building. Step 1, again, is to submit that online inquiry. Now you'll see what I have listed here is that eligible inquiries may come from co-op or condo board members, from property managers, from building superintendents or resident managers. So really what we're looking for here are stakeholders at the building who do represent the building and are empowered to make decisions on behalf of that building. Now, as I mentioned earlier, anybody can fill out this application that we have on our website. And that is the case. Residents who are not, decision makers for their buildings are still invited to complete this application. However, we're going to use their request as essentially an intake form for us to capture a little bit of information about those building managers so that we could better follow up with those building managers. So once we get that information, we'll reach out to them, explain to them a little bit about the program, how it works, what the benefits are, and see if they'd be willing to meet with us to schedule a meeting and see if we can take the next step to implement this program in their building. So we're absolutely, we're going to make sure we're working with the right people in each building to make sure that this program is properly managed. So when we do get that appropriate inquiry or approval from any building to move forward, the next step will be to schedule a site visit or a training for the building where a DSNY representative will actually visit the building. They'll conduct a site visit there, meet with the stakeholders there, so the above parties that I mentioned, to discuss plans for maintenance, plans for bin management and stewardship, so who's going to bring it out to the curb, what's the schedule like, who's going to make sure that it's staying clean, those sorts of considerations. We'll talk through plans for resident communication, so how are we going to make sure that everybody who needs to be actually participating in this service understands why and how, and then what other support can the Department of Sanitation offer to your building to best ensure that that everything is working in the way it needs to work. And the most important thing about this site visit I should mention is that we're actually going to pass off the next bit of paperwork to these buildings, which is called a service agreement. So a service agreement, it's a short document that formalizes that building's plan for participation. It gives the Department of Sanitation a few contacts at the building so that we can stay in touch in case any issues arise that we do need to troubleshoot. And it helps us to train future management or building staff that might take over. So we have a document to refer to in case there is any internal transition inside of a building. Following our receipt of that service agreement, we'll process it and then notify the building of their expected bin delivery window, their expected outreach material delivery window. So we've supplied you all with some of our sample outreach materials today, just to give you a sense of what it is that we provide. And we'll of course notify the buildings of their initial date of service. We always make sure that buildings have a large enough window to receive and prepare to implement their bins prior to that start of service. And then of course we make sure every building has a contact at the Department of Sanitation that they can refer to in case they have any questions or need for troubleshooting. And then following that, service commences. Now when service starts, for residents, it's fairly easy to participate. All you have to do is separate your organics out into any container. If you're in a building with 1 to 9 units, we do provide an in-unit container as well, an in-kitchen container. So that's just one more tool that makes it a little bit easier to get involved in this kind of programming. And this works again just like any other curbside trash or recycling program, right? You store your material first at home, you collect it at home, and then you bring it to a secondary, usually outdoor location, to wait for city collection. And it will work exactly the same in organics. You can line these containers with compostable plastic bags or paper bags we recommend as well. And then on a regular basis, as frequently as you would like, you empty your scraps from your kitchen into your brown organics bin. And then on your regular schedule, you set your organics bin at the curbside and the Department of Sanitation collects it. So, we're not reinventing the wheel here, we're just expanding it to cover a new, well, it's not even a new, because we've always been generating food waste, but we're expanding the program to cover one more stream that we can recycle now. And we would just ask that everybody really give this program a try. It is something new. It is a behavior change. We recognize that. But what we find is that separating your organics out is easy. It helps our environment. It makes people feel good. And once you start doing it, you realize it's not much harder to put your waste here instead of here in your kitchen and at the curbside. We encourage everybody to take the Zero Waste Pledge, and we've provided each of you with a Zero Waste Pledge card. This is a campaign that we're running to, again, get New Yorkers to give this a try. If you pledge to recycle your organics at the curbside or using any of our other organics diversion programs, like our community food scrap drop-off network, then we will send you a free gift. So either a flexible cutting board as pictured here, so that's a reminder to separate out your food scraps as you're generating them, or we'll give you one of our reusable 0 waste by 30 reusable bags. Additionally, as I mentioned before, if you participate in this program, you help the city to create compost, which then you can get back. So just one more good reason to give it a try. Since we have so many community leaders in the room, we're just going to give a plug for everybody here. If you'd be so willing to please help us spread this message to your networks. If you'd be willing to share program information with any listservs that you're a part of or that you maintain, or any other notification networks. Additionally, the Department of Sanitation, we would love to work with any of your offices to set up either opportunities in the office for us to host an informational table, or separate meetings for us to work with potentially interested management companies or other residential properties. And if you have any other ideas for collaboration and ways we could work together to spread the word and engage residents in your districts. If you have other questions, of course, we're available to answer them, but you can also visit us online. Our website is nyc.gov/organics. We have all sorts of informational videos. We have our literature available in PDF format, and other tips and tricks for recycling your organics more efficiently at the curbside. So thank you all for your time. Again, my name's Tal Zaken, And if you have any questions, we'll open them.
Mr. Hall?
Thank you. I'm from Board 12. Is there going to be an enforcement component for the recycling?
Specifically for organics?
Yes.
So
At some point?
It's a
Voluntary?
voluntary program.
Okay.
Right now, for it to be a mandatory program, the city, it has to be a citywide program.
So it would have to be citywide to be mandatory to have an enforcement component. I'm just trying to
Right,
think.
right now, it is definitely
Okay.
voluntary, although we are hopeful that.
You know, you have to talk into the mic.
Excuse me. Yeah, it is, just to reiterate that, it is a voluntary program at this moment. The city is expanding the program to enroll essentially, or to provide organic service for everyone in the city of New York, but at this moment it is voluntary.
Okay, thank you.
John?
So I guess my question to you is it a requirement now under the administrative code for all individuals, property owners, to have to do this at this juncture? Is it a requirement under the administrative code similar to recycling or regular?
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
It's a
You have to
voluntary.
It's
talk into the
voluntary
mic,
at this
sir.
point.
No, it is
Talking
not.
to
It
the
is a
mic.
voluntary, the
voluntary.
organics program is voluntary.
Once if it becomes in effect officially a law, then we will give you a period of grace where you'll be instructed
For
on how to properly
compliance
handle it.
purposes, okay.
And then after that period, then enforcement fines will be tagged along with that.
Okay.
As of now, there's no fines attached to it. It's voluntary. If you choose to participate,
Okay.
we appreciate it. And if you don't,
You know,
it's up to
right,
you.
right. Is it going to be a separate truck for this? Is it going to be an exclusive organics truck?
So
Or is it gonna be a
so far, we
dual-purpose truck?
use an organic truck, correct, yes.
It'll
for
be a
now.
separate truck?
Yes.
For organics?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, thank you.
Cedric?
Good morning, Cedric Lofton, District Manager, Board 1. Now, with your recycling program, you always looked at the level of tonnage that came out before you could actually move on to the next process, out of a lower board or to a higher threshold as far as households. Now, since this is voluntary, what is going to be your threshold to know that, yes, I can now move on once it becomes local law? Or are you going to use that threshold to bring to the council and say, okay, we have established, we can make this threshold, it needs to become a local law, we can now move it from 1 to 10 units up to maybe 15, 20 units, or even into private homes?
Yeah, a little bit uncertain about your question, because for enrollment to take place, the building with 10 plus units, that building will be enrolled. They'll be added to a route. We
Right.
design a route based on what our estimates would be for filling a truck, essentially. Okay, so the enrollment process actually on our back end,
Right.
we are making sure that there are enough stops along that route to fill a truck.
No, actually, my question was, when would you actually realize, the department realizes it is now a success, so we need to move on to the next level of trying to introduce it as a local law?
Yes, so we're planning to have the entire city enrolled in the expansion by the end of 2018. So
Okay.
based on the feedback or participation that we get at that particular time, that's when we will start to look into that, what you're saying, yes.
Okay, and second question, related to the biogas, how much of the trade-off out of recycling components that you get through this process will go toward biogas?
It's a small amount of the material. The majority of the organics goes to be made into compost. So we have facilities regionally that we send our organics to. Most of it's in the Hudson Valley Catskills region.
Okay.
And then on Staten Island, we have a facility that processes all the material from Staten Island itself. So the organics program that manages all the school waste, all the yard waste that's from commercial generators of yard waste, and also the curbside program in Staten Island.
All right.
It's a pilot program that DEP has.
Gloria?
Council District 8 representative. We have a church or churches that do food pantries, soup kitchens. They have a lot of organic waste, and they have gardens, community gardens that also have a lot of organic waste. How would they be able to comply or join this program as well?
Thank you very much for asking that question. We did focus this presentation on residential buildings. However, the enrollment program and those 5 steps that we outlined earlier apply for any nonprofit that any audience that receives collection from the Department of Sanitation can take those series of steps. And furthermore, since you mentioned emergency feeding programs, I want to mention that we do proactive outreach to those organizations. We rely on citywide data sets to access addresses. We research contacts there, and we follow up so that we can conduct site visits. We know a lot of these sites, A, have a lot of organics that could be recycled, and B, stand to benefit a lot from having those organics be better contained in our brown latching hard-sided bins.
And in the Port Morris area, we have a lot of restaurants as well, tons of restaurants, which put it all in a black bag and they throw it on the sidewalk. Can they also be part of this?
Unfortunately not. The Department of Sanitation doesn't collect any kind of material from commercial entities.
Okay.
They're responsible for contracting with a private waste hauler. However, we do have a commercial unit that can provide consultancy and recommendations about how to contract with that private waste hauler.
Right. Thank you.
Brian?
Good morning, everyone. Is there an outreach plan to reach out to schools, high schools, middle schools, elementary schools? They produce a lot of organic waste, and it would be a great way to encourage the next generation to process the organics differently by getting the kids to separate the paper, soiled, that they used in different foods that they're throwing away to then be turned into compost or biogas.
Great, another great question. So certainly we do, in our Bureau, the Bureau of Recycling and Sustainability, where Tal and I work in, we do have a schools unit. They work directly with schools that have organics collection service in those schools. Additionally, when there are events that take place at schools, we would love to be there. So it's, again, our focus is outreach and education. We need to know from community leaders when those events are taking place, from school leaders, things like that. We do have curricula that's based in those schools on how to recycle correctly, that's including organics. We do have workshops that take place in the classrooms as well. And then also over the past 20 years, we've been working at the community level through the NYC Compost Project, who also teaches workshops inside in a K through 12 setting to inform those students about recycling, composting, using finished compost, and actually, just being an environmental steward. So our work is connected in that way. As for this specific program, our approach is usually when there's a PTA or some type of a meeting for both students and adults. We want to acknowledge that we should be teaching the next generation, but at the same time we are delivering these bins to residents, to essentially the parents, the adults, the tenants of those buildings are the ones who are ultimately going to be responsible for setting out at the curb. So we identify both of those as really important issues for us. And again, let us know when there are in your districts, events that are large school events. We'd love to be there to conduct more outreach as well. We have costume characters that can come out to events with a number of people, and that's really great for the kids. Coloring books, things like that as well.
Well, we have a back to school rally September 8th, so I'd love to get your
Certainly,
contact information to get some of that media that we can get out to the kids
Yeah, we'll
and
give
to
out
their parents.
We'll give out our cards after as well. Okay. Jot down our emails here as well too.
Marisol?
Hi, NYCHA. How are we dealing with NYCHA at the moment?
Sure. So DSNY and NYCHA have really just 100% implemented recycling of traditional materials, metal, glass, plastic, and cardboard. Organics is not included in that sort of stream yet. Residents of NYCHA can enroll. However, NYCHA as an agency has not signed on for organics at this moment. So while what Tal was saying is we are certainly hopeful that we can get resident interest and engagement and enroll for the program, the agency itself has not signed on for organics. Okay.
Just to add one more note to that, I mentioned earlier our community food scrap drop-off network. We didn't give much detail about this, but this is a decentralized network of locations where New Yorkers can save their organics at home and then bring them, conveniently within their community for them to be recycled. And we work, since we haven't been able yet to enroll NYCHA in the program, we work to establish these locations near NYCHA facilities so that there are still opportunities available for residents of NYCHA.
Jeremy?
So, three things. Is the city saving money by doing this, or will it save money in the long run? And what happens with the compost? Like you said, there's a plant in Staten Island, otherwise it goes up north. Does what goes up north come back down south? Well, at least eventually. And like, is it specifically going to Parks properties? Is the Parks Department going to use it? So what's happening with the compost? And three, probably tied in with the other two, how are you measuring success? Aside from, like, how do you know it's working in this area so we can expand to the rest of the city?
Sure.
Okay, so first question, this is a program that's expanding. It has started as a pilot, so pilots are costly. When the city is receiving material in much higher tonnages, once obviously the idea is once we're cinching down the waste of landfill waste that's being taken to far out of state, which we are paying for, there's just normal solid waste management. You pay for landfilling and incinerating trash. These regional processor sites are much closer, and that's essentially one of the largest benefits of this program as the cost savings are going. In this immediate iteration, we are expanding a program, so we're adding, in some cases we have to add a route here, or have new fees essentially that we're paying to roll this program out. That's not the end game here. The end game is to stop sending material to landfills, to actually find beneficial reuse from the materials, and there's the cost saving there. We're far from that. This is a baby, the program, it's really just about 3 years old, and we are now in the full expansion. So we're measuring success based off of right now encouraging the residents to participate in the program, better education. What we really need for ultimate success is high truck weights. Actually, instead of sending out all of the heavy material to landfills, actually sending that to regional compost facilities. That's in our office. That's how we measure success. It's really with the truck weights. We want high amounts of organic. So that's all of the fall yard waste. We want all that material, all of the food scraps and fruit and vegetable waste. That material, it's actually some of the heaviest waste as far as what can be thrown out. So we're measuring success based off of those truck weights, and we want high truck weights. It's a collection in CB11 just started. This month. So, we're still doing lots and lots of education. We want to be doing lots of what we're considering back reach, or going back to the community and talking to all the residents and informing them why they should be participating. The material, while it's sent out, there aren't very many locations for regional or within New York City capacity for compost, but in the region there are plenty. One of the sites, name I'm leaving off the top of my head. It is just right above the city, about McEnroe. Yeah, thank you, Tal. McEnroe Organics. They are one of our primary processors for this material. It doesn't necessarily come back once the organics are there. It is their organics. It's their material they often use on site, or they can sell on the market. But all the material that we make on Staten Island, that is our processing facility, that is our material. We actually make a very small amount of revenue off of it because we can sell that back to commercial generators, to landscapers, things like that. And then we hold givebacks. We've held 2 givebacks this summer, both on Staten Island, and we are continuously planning to have more large-scale givebacks. Additionally, we're looking to hold small-scale community board-based givebacks, where we'll identify a community board that has the organics program, send a mailer out, or at least send one out to the community board so that they can be the ones responsible for sending out the information so we don't overwhelm an event. And then we'll distribute 40 pounds of bagged compost. Okay, we have the ability now to bag our compost up and give it out. And that's essentially what our plan is for distributing the material primarily, is to give out to residents who want to use this in their backyard, use it for street trees. We'll also deliver up to 60 bags in pallets for the community groups. If anyone's thinking of organizing a neighborhood cleanup and they also want to take care of street trees, if they have a project or something like that, a cleanup, a community garden, something like that, we can also give that material to them. We deliver it as well. The nyc.gov/getcompost is how you find the essentially order form, I guess I would want to call it, but it is free. And that's our process for getting this material out, essentially.
Okay. John? Mm-hmm.
Just a quick point of clarification. So obviously we're at the point where we're encouraging property owners to enroll, because as soon as you enroll, then there's an opportunity to get your bins and your outreach materials, all that other stuff. It mentions here you're going to get a letter for your set out date times, bin delivery window, and first date of service. So essentially, and I understand when Bruno was talking, depending upon how the number of individuals that would enroll on that in that given block or area, so to speak, would dictate when your first date of service would occur. Right? Is that correct?
For most of the Bronx, that is correct.
That's correct. So would the first date of service, or could the first date of service for organics collection for a given block in the Bronx occur before the actual law is implemented or enacted? The requirement, the law, the local law itself?
At this point, we don't have any plans to enact a law requiring participation in this program.
At some point.
However,
at some point there's going to be a requirement by way of local law that everybody's going to have to comply with organics collection.
We haven't made any statements to that tune at this juncture.
We're in the baby steps of that right now. Right now, we're in the beginning stages of expanding the program. It will have to be completed. Numbers will have to come up. It will have to be brought up to City Hall, and it will have to be a whole lengthy process. So at this stage right now, we're just expanding the voluntary program right now.
So you're just pretty much seeing how the numbers.
We're expanding the voluntary program, want everyone participation in the program. That's it. Okay.
Our goal is to get as many people at this stage involved and participating in these programs as possible, so that we have as much data as we can to understand the best way to operate this program moving forward.
I'll just add for Bronx Community Board 8, 10, 11, and 12 enrolled participants in organics collection service. Their service would start, it would be just, the regular recycling collection day. Okay, so once you receive your bin, you have your service on the regular recycling day. That would be different for community boards 1 through 7 and 9 in the Bronx. Okay, there is a little nuance just because those districts, we fully rolled out the program too.
Okay. Yes, Cedric?
How many enrollees do you have at this point in the program?
Excuse me?
How many enrollees do you have at this point in the program? Yes.
So the program is, at this stage, we're serving upwards of 2 million New Yorkers. That is a slightly different answer than the question you asked, which is how many enrollees are there in the program? Because again, I want to make this distinction between those who automatically receive service through our curbside rollouts and those who receive service by requesting the program and then enrolling. So for buildings that have requested the program and enrolled, we're at upwards of 700 buildings, keeping in mind that those buildings can have anywhere from 10 units to however many you can fit into a building. And we have experience working at all, along that spectrum. So, we work with your smaller 10-unit HDFC or co-op. We work with your larger, apartment complex. We've worked with some of the largest buildings in New York, buildings that house up to 900 units, complexes that have up to or over 100 buildings in them. And so, we have a developed portfolio of best practices and, like to shop that around when we meet with new buildings.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Yes. Yes, Rosemary.
On page 9, Community Board 8 and Community Board 10 have an asterisk next to it. I'm from
Yes.
Community Board 8. Is there something I need
There's
to know about
nothing
the
to fear
asterisk?
here. So nothing to fear at all. No, those asterisks, all they mean is that community boards 8 and 10 partially were served previous to now. So all we're doing in those districts is we're completing the district with service. That's all that's all that means.
Okay. I want to thank you all for coming in and sharing with us. And the community boards can have you actually come out to their board and explain the program.
They can. We're actually planning to follow up with each community board. We'll send an email and a phone call to each of you to coordinate that.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Okay. Our last item on the agenda is the hurricane evacuation signs and hurricane preparedness. We have a presentation by Andrew Mark, the Director of Transportation and Infrastructure for the New York City Emergency Management Unit.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm not Andrew Mark, but my name is Jo Karina Duarte, and I'm a Deputy Director for Intergovernmental Affairs at New York City Emergency Management. Thank you for having us here today.
Right.
We're going to start our presentation talking about hurricane season. How many of you know when is the hurricane season start nationwide? May, August. Actually starts on June.
Yes.
It goes June all the way through November nationwide. But how many of you actually know when is the highest risk for New York City? What are the months?
August, September.
August all the way to October. So we're here today to talk about New York City emergency management and the way we actually prepare the city for potential hurricane hitting the city. You have all your package in front of you, a yellow bag. It has tons of information how to be ready and prepare. But before we even start about talking about the different zones that they are in New York City, just want to let you know that we are having, this year, it's going to be, according to NOAA, it's going to be a very active season for hurricane. And as you may already know, there's a couple of hurricanes out there. Thank God none of them have hit New York City or been a threat to New York City. But that doesn't mean we cannot be ready and plan ahead before something hits New York City again. So today we're here to talk about different zones that we had and how can you, your board, and also your constituents can be ready for a potential hurricane hitting the city. So you might have this pamphlet in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
This is basically a hurricane evacuation pamphlet that teaches you all about hurricanes, the potential threat the hurricane could cause, but most importantly, it teaches you whether or not you live in an evacuation zone. How many of you know if you live in an evacuation zone or if your board's in an evacuation zone? Okay, not a lot. So we're glad that we're here today then.
Yes.
So New York City has 6 different evacuation zones. They're color-coded. One is the zone 1 is red, and it's the one that most potentially will be likely to be hit or evacuated if a hurricane threatens New York City. And they go all the way to 6. A lot of the questions that we get is what happened in the white area? Why there's no color code in there, or it's just white? But the reason why they're white, that means that they are higher grounds and they're less likely to be flooded. These maps changed since Sandy. As you may recall, during Sandy, FEMA maps were zone A, B, and C. Now they're 1 through 6. We have included more zones that were flooded during Sandy, and we have included those in this map. So why are we telling you this? Why it's important to know whether or not you live in a zone? If a potential hurricane is about to hit New York City or it's a potential threat to New York City, you're definitely going to hear us talking about it more often, and most likely you're going to hear about evacuation zone and you need to evacuate. We don't want you to wait for last minute to evacuate. We want to make sure that you're ready, that you know whether or not you live in a zone, and if you don't live in a zone, that you understand whether or not your family, your business, your organization, your work is in a zone, and that you plan ahead. There's tons of information that we'll have that we brought today and that we have available to you on our website. This information is in different languages. We have it translated into 12 languages printed, and on the website we have it up to 26 different languages. So there's no excuse. You need to make sure people know about this, that they evacuate. So what we're here today is asking you to help us spread the word. There's a couple of things that you can do. You can create your own emergency plan, which is this booklet. So if you don't know how to create your own emergency plan, this booklet guides you step by step how to create your own emergency plan. If you have a business, there's also a business guide that we didn't bring today, but it's available online as well. We can send it to all of your boards that teach business how to create their own emergency plan as well. How to have a continuity operation plan in case something goes down in their area. In addition to that, we're asking you to, identify whether or not you live in a zone and if a family member lives in a zone. So maybe you might not live in a zone. Maybe you live in one of those white areas in the map. But maybe a family member lives in a zone and do not want to evacuate to one of the centers that we have allocated here in the list. So why not have a plan to stay with someone that do not live in a zone? In addition to that, we're asking you to stay informed. And there's many different ways that you can stay informed what's going on throughout the city. One of the ways that we actually promote is called Notify NYC. It is the red card that you actually got in your package. Notify NYC is a free service that you can get, and it's the free notification service provided by New York City. It tells you about weather alerts, it tells you about evacuation, school evacuation, it tells you about solar disruption, traffic advisor. And most likely, all of you that are not signed up have seen that we have sent a message to the board saying there's something happening in your district. We have sent a notification out to subscribers. So that means that whoever is subscribed within that zip code is getting information something is happening in the district, whether it's a hurricane or whether something as a fire, or water destruction, and a blackout in their district. It's a very good program. You can select up to 5 zip codes, like me, that I work in Brooklyn, but I live in another borough. It's very important for me to know what's going on in the borough that I live. So I have signed up to 3 different zip codes. You can sign up to 5. If you can get it via email, you can get it text message, you can get it to your landline. So those who do not have a smartphone can actually get an option to get it through landline. And coming up soon, there's gonna be an application that you can sign up to. It's gonna be actually following you based on your geographic, where you at. So if you download it on your phone and you are in Times Square and we have another incident in which someone tried to run into pedestrians, you will be immediately getting a notification based on your geographic information where you're located, saying something is happening in that area, avoid that area, stay out of there. That's gonna come up soon. And also, I don't know if you guys heard, we got funding from City Council to actually have this application in different languages. So that's gonna come up hopefully by next year. We're gonna have a Notify NYC translated into 12 different languages, which, again, our materials currently are, but the messages are just in English. So as soon as you sign up, you'll be able to select Spanish, any other language that you might be interested in, and you'll be getting these notifications in that language as well. In addition to all these year-round efforts that we had to prepare the city to be ready not only for hurricane, but also for any type of emergency, my colleague Brian, which is our new routines member for intergovernmental affairs, is gonna talk about the specific month that we actually make a lot of promotions to being ready.
Sure. So my name is Brian Fargnoli. I'm the Intergovernmental Outreach Coordinator at New York City Emergency Management. September is National Preparedness Month, and in the spirit of that, we're going to use it to ask everyone to prepare both now and in the future for any type of emergency that can happen in New York City. In the spirit of National Preparedness Month, we're going to be doing a number of events throughout the 5 boroughs in New York City, and we have an event coming up in the Bronx at the Bronx Zoo on Sunday, September 17th from 10 to 4 p.m. That said, we do events based on preparedness throughout the year, and if you'd like us to come to your board or any community group, we're happy to do so. We generally require about 3 weeks notice to do it, and you could reach out to us and we would be happy to connect you to the proper people to get that done.
Thank you. Talking about hurricane evacuation preparedness, we're gonna talk now about the coastal storm season. So my colleague is gonna talk about that.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Mosi London. I'm within the Transportation Infrastructure Unit at New York City Emergency Management. I see a lot of familiar faces. I had presented this before in regards to the hurricane evacuation zones that we have within the Bronx. You could just scroll over. up here. So to just get started, I'll give you an idea of what the previous route and evacuation signage program was for the entire city. So in total, there were 19 signed routes throughout the city, and this was implemented as a part of the 2007 coastal storm program. The goal of the program was to direct drivers specifically to evacuation centers with available parking. So it was focused on parking and providing spaces for when people are evacuating. If you look at the map that Yokarina pointed out, you'll see the location of the new evacuation centers for the 2017 coastal storm season. Again, for the previous program, it was a pathfinding methodology where signs are positioned along routes, and it was really a breadcrumb style guiding people from their point of origin to our evacuation center. Continues to go on. And if you look to the right, I guess to right here, you'll see the example of that previous sign. Just going on. So you have the coastal storm sign, which would just be a directional arrow. It would say to an evacuation center and what your evacuation center would be. So in the past, it was Aqueduct Racetrack. You can scroll up. Also, to note that the signage conforms to the manual and uniform traffic control devices. So let's say you're in Florida or anywhere else, the signage that you see should be very familiar. So in the map that you see here, this is an example of what the previous signage was. So for the previous signage, it was really just guiding you from City Island and Thorsneck within to the inland zones. But the deficiency of this program was that the majority of the signs that you see were actually in line outside of the evacuation zones that actually exist there. So for a person that wasn't familiar with the evacuation zones or hurricane surge risk in their areas, they wouldn't see any signage. The other issue is that for evacuation centers, they for this season they change, and for the foreseeable future they can change based on amenity needs. So we've been revising our evacuation centers so they could all be accessible based on the MOU that we currently have. So with that, we had to incorporate that into the evacuation signage program. So just to continue the conversation of the disadvantages of the previous program, so for the routing strategy, it was the southern model. So if you look at a lot of the southern states, Florida, Virginia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, their evacuation routes are miles long. We're talking about like 50, 100 miles long where they're evacuating from the coast. That can't be said really for New York City, where if you're going to evacuate, you're just moving inland a couple of miles. So. Again, the biggest, some of the advantages is with that, there was a minimal public awareness in regards to that. The existing routes may put people in more danger, where the idea for coastal evacuation routes is that you're doing it during blue skies. So when an evacuation order is issued, it will be 48 hours in advance of landfall, and landfall is defined as 0 hour where 39 mile-per-hour winds are in the vicinity of the New York City metro area. And even at that point, it should still be relatively safe. But again, we're encouraging people to evacuate way before then and come up with a plan. So whether deciding to go to an evacuation center, friends or family, hotel or motel, or even leaving the city entirely to get to safety. So the idea is to use these evacuation routes prior to landfall or the presence of surge or any rainfall. In the event that there is rainfall, the issue with the previous sign is those roadways may actually be flooded. Encouraging people to go along them would pose a hazard. Let's go up. And the other thing was that the signage is inconsistent with the city's evacuation messaging and operations, which I'll discuss a little bit about later. So again, going to the southern model, this is really what you look at. So when you think of evacuation and the mass exodus, it's really like this, where the law enforcement agencies will be implementing counterflow lanes, where instead of just having a northbound and southbound, you'll have all northbound lanes, and you'll just see congested traffic, cars parked up for hours. Within New York City, this is really not the case, where even though we have a large population, in terms of auto ownership, it's really just highest in Staten Island, where it's ranging from 50 to 75% in the other boroughs. So it's really a public transportation focused transportation network. The other part with that being said is that the distance, again, is not long miles. We're not talking about 50 or 100 miles for evacuation. We're talking about 5 to 10 miles. So again, talking about the southern models, if you look at Virginia here, it's about a 70-mile evacuation route from the center or the coastal area inland. And then if you look at North Carolina, again, it's a long distance, 90 miles. But then when we look at just for Bronx in the particular, where you're looking at the evacuation zone, the evacuation zones designated for zones 1 through 6, it's about 1.1 miles or 2.4 miles at max. So there isn't that long distance to get away from the hazard areas, but we still want to communicate the best way to get there. In terms of some of the disadvantages, again, there was some public messaging inconsistency. So if you want to know your zone, you could just go to newyorkcity.gov/knowyourzone. And for that, you'll be able to look at your closest evacuation center. The issue was that when you go through the zone finder, if you look to the right here, you'll be able to see that it will point you to the closest one. It'll tell you if it's accessible or not. It'll give you the address, and then you could you could use directions. So it's connected to Google, so it will tell you if you wanted to walk there, bike there, drive, or bus, or subway. The issue with the signage, though, is that let's say you were at the southernmost tip here where the star is located. The zone finder would tell you that your closest evacuation center would be the one to the left, but for the signage, it would take you all the way up to Lehman College, where, again, this is not as efficient. So if I'm somewhere located in an evacuation zone in the South Bronx, I wouldn't want to have to travel so far away from home in order to get to a refuge of safety. In terms of exploring the different concepts, again, looking at the southern model, we're definitely planning for more of a tsunami type event where the biggest hazard during a coastal storm is really the surge. If you remember during Sandy and the places that were hardest to impact, such as Staten Island and the Rockaways, this was really the surge that proved to be the biggest hazard. So we were looking at different places and how they approach that. So looking at Hawaii and Japan and how they do tsunami planning. Also, we partnered with the College of Staten Island for Know Your Zone, and it was really the idea that we're trying to push out just to get to higher ground. Even though with the previous evacuation science program, it was directing people to evacuation centers, in reality, that may not be the best place for a family or depending on your needs. So it's really just getting to high ground, a place of safety, and then deciding what your next move is. Again, we still encourage people to have a plan in place, having multiple points of contact. But in the event that you don't have a plan and you're just in the area, the biggest thing is that once you get to high ground, you'll be able to determine what your next plan of action is. So with the current program as it's rolled out, it's again to provide active direction along the shortest route to higher ground. So instead of just one route, you'll just see signage that's placed along different streets across the network. So let's say based on a given scenario that a certain street is not available due to storm conditions or because there's construction, there'll be another route or signs that would direct you to high ground. Increase the year-round awareness of hurricane risk. So by seeing the signage in these evacuation zones rather than just inland, you'll become aware that you're in a hazardous area. Providing direction that's both useful to both people evacuating in a timely manner as well as those who are evacuating at last minute. Even though it's our stance as an agency to encourage people to evacuate in advance before the presence of storm conditions, we know that that's not what happens. It happened in the Rockaways, it happened in Staten Island. So in the event that people are doing these last minute evacuations, we just wanted them to do it as safely as possible. And by changing the approach where instead of just having this one gratuitous route, we'll just have multiple signage that allows people to evacuate to higher ground. The other part is concentrating signs on high traffic streets, so streets that have the most capacity that could support the large volumes of evacuation. And again, de-emphasizing specific routes in the EC locations. Again, for specific routes, in case that those routes are not available, and then for EC locations, depending on conditions, they may or may not be open. So for example, for Lehman College, there may be something that's happening to that facility that during time for a coastal storm is not available. So we don't want to direct people that says a sign, your closest EC is Lehman College, in the event that it's not available at that time. So when you look at the, and you also have the handout including all the outreach materials, you see a map of the current locations for evacuation signs. For each of those, it ranges from 1 to 3 signs that you'll see at the location that will all be pointing inland. And what you'll see is just this simple sign where you'll just have the blue arrow that's pointing outside of the evacuation zone. So the 3 hours that we implement is a 12 o'clock, a 9 o'clock, and a 3 o'clock hour. So again, at a certain intersection, you may see a maximum of 3 where you're pointing someone to go further inland. The biggest thing in terms of consideration is just the input. So I've met again. I see a lot of familiar faces. In January, I believe February, we met with the Bronx Borough staff, president staff. We also reached out to our partners at DOT and the Commissioner Lopez, borough engineers there as well to get input. We also spoke with NYPD and the officers there who are familiar with the communities to get input for the locations. So the biggest thing that for us coming here is to inform you about the signage program as it's rolled out. We completed installing all of them on June 1st, right in time for the coastal storm season. And right now we're just doing surveys just to see if the signage are in visible locations, if they make sense, or if they're pointing people in the right direction. So if you see them within your community boards, and specifically it would be 1, 2, 9, and 10. Again, those are the areas that are within the coastal storm hazard zones. But if you see any signs and you feel that they're inadequate or pointing people in the wrong way, you could just reach out to us and we'll make those corrections. In addition, I know you can see there's some gaps identified in the map. The two areas that I'll point out specifically is Horns Point, which we've received some feedback in that regard, where even though there is a lot industrial area there, we know that there are residents that are there that would need to be informed of it. So we're working at ways that we could also reach out to them. And the other area is Co-op City, where we have signs planned out, but again, it's the outreach to the community members of there and to see what is the best approach to addressing those. But yeah, if there's any other questions in regards to that, I'm free to answer them. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments regarding the presentation?
And Madam Chair, I just want to state that we started outreach to talk about specifically on this issue to some of the boards. We were able to meet with you guys. But if you have any questions, if you need any information, if you want materials in any language, let us know. We are accessible to you 24/7, not only to inform you that something is happening at your district during an emergency, but anytime. So feel free to reach out to us.
Okay, thank you so much. Before we close, I do have a couple of announcements for you. This coming Saturday, August 26th, from 11 to 3, the Borough President will be sponsoring, along with others, our back-to-school literacy and health fair. It will take place at the Pablo Casals Middle School, 181 in Co-op City. It's at 800 Baychester Avenue, so it's easy to get to. And it will be conducted whether there's rain or shine, and right now I think it's supposed to be sunny. But we will have giveaways, there's entertainment, and it's really good to get your children's school supplies. Also, the Borough President invites you to the Muslim school holiday. It will take place on Saturday, September 9th from 12 to 3. It will be at PS 83 at 950 Rhinelander Avenue. The entrance is on Radcliffe Avenue. It'll be a fun-filled day, and one of the co-sponsors is the Bronx Children's Museum. So those two announcements I wanted to make to you. I have a third announcement, and it's somewhat sad because our Vicky Weddington is retiring this week. And so we won't have her anymore. So is she outside there? Let her come in and let us give her a good applause.
Yes.
Where is she?
Oh, she's sauntering in. She's having second thoughts. Thank you, Vicki. Thank you for your years of service to the community boards. We thank you so much. We're going to miss you. Okay. And with that, if there are no other announcements, this meeting is adjourned. Enjoy the rest of the summer.
Thank you.